And this month does mark the 5th anniversary of the signing of the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. Hard to believe it's been 5 years. And that was a day so full of hope and promise after so many years of hard work for New York to really step up and address the existential crisis of climate change. We recently experienced the hottest day ever recorded on Earth. So we know that now more than ever, we need to show real leadership in the fight to save our planet for future generations. And that's why we're here. So thank you. Thank you, all of you, for being here, for being a part of this movement, for lending your time and energy to this important fight for our future. Today, I'm really looking forward to hearing from our expert guests about why Cap and Invest is so critically important to implementing our climate plan so we can achieve the ambitious targets that were laid out in our Climate Act signed 5 years ago. First up, we have Samir Ranade, who is the Senior Advisor for Climate Justice at NYSERDA. And Samir is going to be giving us some background and walk us through how a Cap and Invest program would work, how it would be implemented, and what the benefits are for all New Yorkers. We'll record this teach-in, so don't worry if you need to check out early. We hope you can stay till the end, but we will record it. And there will, as always, be an opportunity to ask questions. So if you want to put them in the chat as we go along, that's probably the best thing to do. And today we'll have 2 Q&As. First, we'll have a short one just for Samir, and then he's going to hop off. And then there'll be another opportunity to ask questions of our other speakers at the end. So keep them coming in the chat. And as always, we'll circulate the recording, the slides, and the answers to the questions that we aren't able to get to today. And of course, thanks to everybody at NYCP for holding down the back end and making all this possible. Couldn't do it without you and couldn't do it without our incredible partners in this movement for clean energy and climate action. So thanks again for being here. And Samir, take it away. Oh, we can't hear you.
Muted.
There you go.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me? Great.
Yes.
Let me do a screen share. Can you see the screen with the PowerPoint slides?
Perfect.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here. As Betta mentioned, I'm Samir Ranade, Senior Advisor for Climate Justice on NYSERDA's Energy, Climate, and Equity team. Our team plays an important role in meeting our state's mandate to advance climate justice. And today, I'm really excited to present and encourage your submission of public comments on New York's Cap and Invest program, which is at the pre-proposal stage of development. And your comments are welcome on any aspect of the policy. And I'll get into specific aspects for you to consider. As the abbreviation is NYCI, we've given the program the nickname NICI because it rolls off the tongue easily, so I'll be referring to it as that. NICI was recommended in the scoping plan released at the end of 2022 as required by the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, as Betta mentioned, which I'll call the Climate Act for short. And in her 2023 State of the State address, Governor Hochul directed NYSERDA and the Department of Environmental Conservation, which is DEC, to initiate a rulemaking process to develop NICI. It is a critical mechanism by which New York State will achieve its greenhouse gas emission reduction targets in 2030 and 2050, as mandated by the Climate Act. NICI will set an annually declining cap on how much pollution can be allowed, require the entities most responsible for this pollution to pay for it through purchasing what we call emissions allowances. And then it'll invest proceeds from the sale of those allowances into clean energy and climate justice. So the Climate Act puts our state on a path to address disproportionate burden of climate change and pollution borne by historically marginalized and under-resourced communities who suffer the most harm while having contributed the least to the problem. And given these structural disadvantages, these communities are officially called disadvantaged communities by the Climate Act, which is also referred to as DACs or DACs for short. They're defined at both a census tract and household level and identified by a holistic set of considerations that include exposure to climate change and environmental burdens, health vulnerabilities, and socio-demographic characteristics that focus on poverty and environmental racism. The Climate Act requires identifying DACs and prioritizing them in the benefits of clean energy and energy efficiency and climate action, which applies to NICI as well. So this is a large, complex program with many important features that I won't be able to cover. I'll provide background on how the program works and focus on its two core components, which is the cap on emissions and the amount of proceeds it would generate for investment. Our state modeled the benefits of implementing the cap combined with the investments, and those benefits are listed on this slide. We found that NICI will lower energy costs for low and middle income households in New York through a combination of a benefits payment and access to high quality green infrastructure and technology. It will lower air pollution statewide and yield the greatest physical health benefits in communities where pollution is most burdensome. And it will create more good green jobs. Scale of benefits realized is positively related to the amount of money invested in reducing emissions. Larger investments means more benefits. So let's review our greenhouse gas emission sources and the targets required by the Climate Act that Cap and Invest will help advance. On the right side, you see New York's emissions in 1990. That's the baseline year from which our state's emissions reductions will be measured. You can see our emissions in 2021, the most recent year for which emissions data is available, and you can see our emission reduction targets first in 2030, when the Climate Act requires us to lower emissions to 40% below 1990 levels, and secondly, in 2050, where our emissions must be at least 85% below 1990 levels. Any 1990 level emissions that may remain at that point, represented by the blue bar, would need to be removed from the atmosphere through a process called carbon capture and sequestration, which the scoping plan primarily envisions doing through natural sequestration of carbon in our forests, wetlands, and soil. So turning to the left side, pie chart breaks down New York's greenhouse gas emissions by economic sector. I want to note that the green slice representing emissions from electric power generation is already capped by RGGI, which is a sibling of NICI and stands for Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. This is a cap and invest program that New York is a part of, along with 10 other northeastern states. NICI would extend the cap to cover the emissions represented by all other sectors. And as you can see, buildings and transportation are the #1 and 2 highest emitting sectors. As we cut emissions from them, we also reduce the co-pollutants like particulate matter, which are released alongside the greenhouse gases. These two sectors are the largest source of air pollution that causes a disproportionate burden. But fortunately, NICI can target the reduction of these emissions through the investments it makes. So now let's do an overview of how NICI will work. First, to reduce emissions, NICI will set a legally enforceable cap on the amount of greenhouse gases that can be emitted in New York on a statewide basis. Under the cap, there would be an emissions allowance budget representing the total emissions that can be released in a given year. The cap and the associated allowance budget would start out at the current level of emissions and decline every year along a trajectory to meet the emission reduction limits in 2030 and 2050. Each allowance would represent 1 metric ton of greenhouse gases emitted. And for context, 1 ton of CO2 is produced by burning about 115 gallons of gasoline. Those entities responsible for large-scale sources of greenhouse gas emissions would be obligated to obtain an allowance from this budget to cover each ton of their greenhouse gases. And these entities fall into 2 categories. The first is stationary sources that release at least 25,000 metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions a year. And the emission sources are in a single location, and they include manufacturing facilities, landfills, and large buildings like hospitals or college campuses. The other category are the diffuse emissions released in our transportation and building sectors. The fuel suppliers that sell liquid or gaseous fuel to an end user in New York would be obligated to buy an allowance for every ton of greenhouse gases their fuels release when burned. The volume of fuel they sell would need to be at the thresholds listed on the slide, which would obligate 99% of the fuel suppliers in New York. And so these obligated entities would purchase most of the allowances they need through quarterly auctions run by the state. And we're proposing that their emissions be measured and verified by a third party. At the end of every reporting period, they would need to surrender their allowances to DEC equal in number to the emissions they're responsible for. And those allowances would be retired and never to be used again. Obligated entities can also bank allowances for future years or trade them to another entity that is willing to pay a higher price for it. Both of these features encourage early action to reduce emissions. Obligating an entity to buy an allowance for every ton of emissions they need to release creates a disincentive to pollute and encourages them to find ways to reduce their emissions. And this disincentive grows over time as the price of allowances progressively gets more expensive as the cap is lowered and fewer allowances are in supply. We can reduce emissions even further by investing the proceeds collected from the sale of allowances into emission reduction projects like public transportation, vehicle electrification, renewable energy, and retrofitting buildings. And so about 2/3 of the proceeds generated by NYSERDA will be dedicated to fund clean energy and other environmental protection programs. The other third or so will be used to protect consumers and small businesses to support affordability. NYSERDA is important for several reasons. It will be designed according to the 5 guiding principles listed on the white bar that Governor Hochul directed DEC and NYSERDA to follow. New York's climate leadership will encourage other states to create similar programs which could link with ours and create greater economies of scale. And crucially, NYSERDA will cut the most pollution in communities where it does the greatest harm to human health. So now let's review the process for developing NYSERDA. We began an initial stage of public outreach on the pre-proposal in June 2023. We assessed that input and then did a second stage of outreach, which we concluded this past March 1st. We're currently incorporating that input in the creation of a draft regulatory proposal. Once released, it will kick off a public comment period with at least 2 public hearings. Once the public comment period closes and the comments are assessed, final regulations of the program will be released. The mandatory reporting of emissions by large sources would begin and the program would be launched. NYSERDA actually consists of 3 rules. One is on the design and application of the cap. The second is on the mandatory greenhouse gas emissions reporting requirement. And the third is on how the auctions should be run. More information on each of these is available on the website. We are aiming to launch NYSERDA next year, and we anticipate issuing the draft for public comment later this year. So while the March 1st deadline to inform the pre-proposal has officially passed, you can still offer comments now and do so multiple times if you wish. They'll be accepted all the way until the formal public comment period closes. So now let's turn to investments. In the 2024 or the 2023-2024 fiscal year state budget, Governor Hochul and the legislature established the Climate Action Fund, which is where the proceeds from the sale of the allowances at the auctions will be deposited and allocated into the three accounts on this slide. To help mitigate cost increases to consumers, 30% of the proceeds will go to the Consumer Climate Action Account, from which New Yorkers would receive an annual benefits payment. And the legislature required the state to conduct a climate affordability study on how to design this payment to be effective and equitable. The study suggested a progressively structured payment so that the lowest income households would get the greatest benefit. The top 20% of New York's income earners would need a benefit, and the benefit would vary in size by geography to account for regional differences in energy costs. I'd highly recommend that you check out the study for more details, and I can drop a link to that in the chat later. Similarly, an industrial small business climate action account was created that will direct up to 3% of future NYSERDA proceeds to mitigate costs to industrial small businesses. The remaining 2/3 of NYSERDA proceeds will be directed to a climate investment account to support the transition to a green economy, and it can fund any of the activities identified in the scoping plan covering renewable energy and energy efficiency, climate adaptation and resilience, workforce development, and in increasing the capacity of communities to engage in these efforts. As required by the Climate Act, at least 35% with the goal of 40% of the benefits of the investments from the Climate Investment Account or from the whole Climate Action Fund must be realized in DACs. NYSERDA can fund efforts like DEC's Community Air Monitoring Program, which is working with the residents of 10 DACs to identify hyper-local sources of air pollution and develop solutions to them. And as these projects are tested and refined, they can be replicated statewide. And relatedly, NYSERDA could also fund investment plans proposed in the scoping plan to ensure air quality improvements in DACs every 5 years. That could have annual reports on outcomes and success metrics, identifying reductions in priority pollutants. Green bar on the bottom lays out our process seeking public input on the use of NYSERDA proceeds under the Climate Investment Account. This process will begin soon. We'll share a draft framework for investments and collect public input on the use of proceeds with an emphasis on ways to benefit DACs. And then with an assessment of all of that input, state agencies will then develop investment proposals, which will then be rolled into the fiscal year 2025-2026 budget process. And this will be a part of a multi-year planning process that will come back to get input for future years. And now I want to introduce some important design elements related to the price of allowances in the auctions and our modeled projections on how much revenue could be generated. And before I describe the dollar amounts, let me just give quick background on how the auctions will work. There would be a single round of sealed bids. There would be a price floor that would require a minimum bid price for the allowances to maintain an incentive for entities to reduce their emissions and guarantee a certain revenue stream. Additionally, there would be a price ceiling that would set the maximum bid price for allowances, above which the price could not go, in order to help keep the program affordable. And there's also contingency measures that would need to be exhausted before either the price floor or the ceiling can be reached. So our state team has modeled 3 different price ceiling scenarios that are included in the proposal, which you see here as A, B, and C, with C being the lowest price, B higher, and A the highest. You can see where the price ceiling starts out at for each in 2025. It would jump by 5% in 2026 and increase to an even higher ceiling level in 2027, which you can see, and then go up by 6% every year thereafter. So in the event that demand for allowances reaches the price ceiling, the state would then sell price ceiling units. and they would be made available in unlimited supply to every obligated entity that needs one. Price ceiling units or PCUs, they are the same as emission allowances, but they include a range of restrictions. Price ceiling units couldn't be traded or banked, and they must be immediately retired for compliance. They can only be purchased in quantities sufficient to place an obligated entity into compliance and no more. They would only be available for sale around the time of compliance. And our modeling found that in all three scenarios, in every year of the auction, the price ceiling would be reached. The table shows how much revenue each scenario would be projected to raise in 2025, 2030, and 2035. With A being the highest price, it would generate the most revenue. The price ceiling scenarios are a critical area that we're seeking public input on, and we'd appreciate your thoughts on the appropriate price ceiling level among these scenarios, whether the ceiling should be even higher or lower or not exist at all. So now let me go into some of the findings on the impacts of each price ceiling scenario. This shows how much emissions each price ceiling is modeled to reduce. In 2030, scenario A would cut them by 39 million metric tons and bring overall emissions from obligated entities down to 194 million metric tons. Scenarios B and C, which are the lower and lowest price scenarios respectively, would reduce less emissions than scenario A. Difference grows over time, as you can see in the comparison to 2035 on the right of the remaining emission levels in buildings, transportation, and all other sectors. Scenario A is the darkest bar on the bottom, B is blue, C is orange, and gray is the status quo. In each sector, the amount of emissions that scenario A can reduce compared to B and C increases from 2030 to 2035, and scenario A would cut even more emissions in the years beyond that. This slide shows the significant improvements to our physical health that our model found NYSERDA would realize from the reduction in air pollution, specifically in particulate matter 2.5. On the left side of the graph are the health effects from air pollution, like premature mortality, hospitalizations, and asthma exacerbation. The middle of the table shows the avoided number of cases of each of these effects and how they would decline every year. The health benefits represented by these avoided cases would occur across the state, but as shown by the orange bars on the right, greater fraction of the benefits would occur in DACs. For example, geographically, DACs make up 36% of New York's population, but 71% of the reduced asthma-related emergency room visits, or 52% of the reduction in respiratory symptoms would occur in DACs. And these numbers are modeled off scenario A, which would drive the greatest emission reductions as previously shown and yield the greatest benefits in terms of these avoided cases. So let's take another look at these benefits. So each of these pie charts shows the sectors where the volume of pollution is, and thus where the greatest benefits can be realized from achieving reductions. The chart on the far left shows that on a statewide basis. The middle one shows where the benefits would occur in DACs only, and the one on the far right shows them in non-DACs. As you can see, in terms of where the benefits come from, there isn't much difference between the three. About 90% of the benefits throughout the state would come from reducing emissions in buildings and on-road transportation, with more benefits coming from reducing non-road and industrial emissions. A small fraction of the health benefits is expected to come from reducing stationary source emissions from industrial facilities, which would be the only source that is directly obligated to obtain allowances for their emissions. The allowances for the emissions from all other sectors would be purchased by the fuel supplier, which is upstream of where the fuels are combusted. And that's why surgically targeting the burdensome emissions in the transportation and building sectors will require locally focused investment strategies, like replacing oil burners with clean heat pumps or retrofitting diesel burning trucks and buses with electric engines. Now let's turn to the jobs. This slide visualizes some of the key conclusions about NYSERDA's net impacts on employment, which we modeled with scenario A as being implemented alongside other policies like the Clean Energy Standard and the Clean Energy Fund. Jobs in the electricity and building sectors would produce the most net gains in jobs. Building jobs would encompass things like renovations and heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, while electricity jobs would include generation, storage, transmission, distribution, and hydrogen. There would be a net loss of jobs in transportation, which includes vehicle maintenance and conventional fueling stations, but there are job gains in this sector associated with the construction and installation of electric vehicle charging and hydrogen fueling stations. Over half of the jobs that would be created are in construction, and our analysis also finds job growth in manufacturing and professional services and other sectors that benefit from the increased economic activity created by NYSERDA, which is called induced jobs. So overall, this slide underscores that NYSERDA is likely to provide net job benefits to the state economy as a whole and in key industries, and the number of jobs created would exceed those lost by a factor of 1 to 9, or sorry, rather 9 to 1. And in closing, I want to go on the energy journey of the average low-income household in New York City that we modeled from 2025 to 2030. We assumed it doesn't own a car and lives in a non-weatherized home heated by gas. These are two scenarios based on the price in scenario A, one in which the household takes steps to decarbonize at a moderate level and the other at an increased level. In either case, in 2025, this household would start out ahead by $1 a month after accounting for the fact that $10 in program costs will be offset by the benefits payment. By 2030, it would experience higher program costs of $18 a month, but these would be offset by a larger benefits payment and by the savings from adopting various clean energy measures. The cost would be lowered by $4 a month from efficient appliances, $6 a month from weatherization. But in the bottom scenario, in the increased decarbonization, the household would save an additional $14 a month from switching to a heat pump. In the moderate scenario, the household would pocket an extra $8 a month, but in the increased decarbonization scenario, it would come out $23 ahead. Since it'd be using more clean energy, it would be able to save a greater portion of the benefits payment rather than use it to pay their energy bills. NYSERDA can fund energy saving measures like efficient appliances, weatherization, and heat pumps. So the takeaway here is that the combination of the energy benefits payment and program investments can result in households paying less overall than they would without NYSERDA. And so with that, I want to thank you for your attention, and I will turn it back to Betta. And let me stop my share.
Thanks so much, Samir. We are a little over, so I don't think we're, and as always, we have fantastic questions and comments in the chat that we definitely want to capture, but I want to be sure that we get to the other speakers. So I think we'll most likely end up capturing these, and Samir, you can answer them in a Google Doc that will circulate, and we will just allow time for one question that you can address right now, just because I want to get to the rest of our program and the hour goes so quickly.
Sure.
So I'm going to ask Carol's question, which is about every new market creating opportunities for financial reward, either by some way to play the market and or new business roles to buy and sell. What opportunities do you see possibly emerging here? What measures do we request be put into place to prevent possible diversion of funds to another layer of business rather than going directly into renewables and investment in DACs?
So the law requires the funds to be deposited in the Climate Action Fund. And I believe the state comptroller also has some authority over that. So I don't see a concern about funds being diverted from there insofar as whether they, to ensure that they are invested in DACs. I mean, that's a legal requirement by the state. We are tracking all of our investments and reporting on that. And that's also something our energy climate equity team is doing. And so if you want to stay in tune on that and measure our progress, I can also invite you to our listserv. But that's a critical requirement that we're absolutely committed to doing. And as far as new markets, I mean, there's a plethora of new things that could be spurred through innovation, and this is a huge chance to grow the clean energy economy.
Thanks so much, Samir. Hopefully that answered your question, Carol. Sort of.
I can follow up with you more, Carol.
Yeah, we can definitely include your email, Samir, and also if there are any issues that you want to touch on really quickly before I know you have to jump, but I think making sure that people stay in touch and are able to continue to provide comments and participate in the processes that are currently unfolding will be really important for our network here.
Yeah, I think that's really it, what you just said. And I can share a link to the Energy Climate Equity listserv with you, Beth, so you can share it to people later. Thank you so much, everyone, and don't hesitate to reach out to me.
Thank you, Samir. That was a fantastic overview. So next up, we have Dale Bryk, who is the Director of State and Regional Policies at Harvard Environmental and Energy Law Program, and also the Senior Fellow at RPA, the Regional Plan Association. So Dale wears many hats and is always doing lots of exciting things in the climate and clean energy space. And so we're so excited to have you, Dale. I know that you have experience to draw from your work on RGGI, and would be great just for you to share some of your thoughts about where we're at as this unfolds.
Thanks, Betta, and hi everybody. Great to see so many people and enthusiasm, and the stuff that's going on in the chat is really great. So I'm so happy to talk to you. I do want to mention I have one other hat, which is I'm a board member for NYSERDA, and I'm absolutely not speaking on behalf of NYSERDA. Samir just spoke on behalf of NYSERDA. But just wanted for people to be aware of that. So I just I'll try to touch on some of the questions that were in the chat, but basically wanted to just sort of unpack some of the, what is Cap and Invest and kind of what can it do for us? I mean, it's a tool. It lives in the ecosystem of all of the other tools, all the other policies, programs, and you guys have been already chatting about some of them. And just like any policy, it could be well or poorly designed. So, how do we make sure that it's well designed and it's delivering on all the objectives that we have? So I think one value that it can bring is, if it's well designed, is a guarantee that we meet the pollution reduction goals that we set for ourselves. The cap is sort of an umbrella on top of all of the other policies. It's not the silver bullet that's going to do everything for us, but we have, clean energy standard, we have NENI programs, whatever. We have a lot of things, but they are not designed specifically to make sure that the pollution is going like this and getting to net zero by 2050 or whatever it is. The cap is designed to do that. So it doesn't obviate the need for any of those policies. I mean, I saw the note about feed-in tariffs, clean energy standard. We still need other things that are designed to deliver other pieces of the puzzle, but the cap brings that guarantee, again, if it's well designed. The power sector is under RGGI. It's already under a cap. So we've had Cap and Invest since 2009 in New York State, only for the power sector. What is the relationship between economy-wide Cap and Invest and that existing RGGI program? Is it going to be one thing or two things? I think it's still under discussion. And I know Anshul has a lot of thoughts on that. So maybe he'll touch on that later. The other thing it does, of course, is provide revenue. As discussed in the chat, not all the revenue we need, but revenue. So, and one thing that that we learned in the RGGI context in developing that program was, and this is in part of the chat with Adam, you know, the businesses that have to buy the pollution permits, if they can, that's a cost of business, just like they're paying for fuel. Now they're paying for this extra thing. You know, there's a cost of doing business. That's all bundled into the prices they charge their customers. Sometimes they're not going to be able to pass that cost. Like if you think about how the power sector works, in New York, there's a clearing price. The clearing price is set by the marginal unit. If you are not the marginal unit, you're not setting that price. So then you do have to eat some of that cost. And the modeling for RGGI, when we designed that program, showed that. So it depends on the market you're in. The other, if you're not the regulated power sector market, you're just, you know, selling gasoline at the gas station, then it's more about what's happening in the market. You're becoming more expensive. If you pass that cost on, then you're more expensive than some alternatives that have lower pollution costs because they're renewables or whatever it would be. So you could lose market share, and you know, that's going to affect your business that way. Sorry, just, okay, great. Thanks. You're muted. You know, it's, you know, you have to think about how the cap and the invest functions, both pieces, both sort of sides of the coin are functioning in the market the way everything else exists. But anyway, back to the revenue piece of it. It's creating this revenue. It's not enough, but it can be substantial. How do we invest that revenue in the solutions that are gonna reduce costs for everyone, expedite the cost of the transition? What's the smartest way to deploy those resources? And it doesn't mean just plug it into things that already exist. We could think of new ways. And I think that's part of the comment, you know, that the comment periods and the request for comment that NYSERDA is soliciting, like what is the smartest way for each of those three ways that they're distributing the resources to achieve those goals of lowering costs, protecting customers, and expediting the transition to clean energy solutions in the smartest way. I just want to, I think, Carol, your question is really good, and we should have like a sidebar on that, and maybe you can have that with Samir. My sense of what you're getting at is like, how do we protect this market from third parties to come in and just make money off the market? Not steal the proceeds, but like, I'm just going to buy allowances and try to make money off of the like arbitrage, like fluctuating cost of allowances. And that is, they have adopted protective measures in RGGI to prevent that. And we should go talk to RGGI Inc. and understand how that's worked, what hasn't worked, and make sure that they're employing those tools here. But I'm sure that is on the radar. I think Samir didn't totally get where you were going. And then just some lessons from, you know, RGGI and all other efforts to develop cap and invest. You know, what are we trying to do here? What are the objectives? For example, like how do we maximize benefits for disadvantaged communities? And like, we really want to get rid of that facility, or we really want to make sure, you know, people in affordable housing are getting, you know, access to heat pumps, and they're getting the air conditioning and the quality of life improvements that come with that. We can't make everything, all of those benefits happen just with the cap of the design of the cap. But we also have the design of the revenue and how you spend it. So we have to think of both sides and how we're designing them to get the objectives. And let's just focus on the objectives. How is this tool going to help us meet them? And like I said, it's not going to do everything. We still have to use our other tools, but can we get the benefits that this tool will give us, you know, if we design it in a smart way? And it's, you know, it's part of that ecosystem of all the others. And then the last thing I'll say is, you know, Samir mentioned a couple of the flexibility mechanisms, price ceilings and price floors. And we do want to have flexibility. We don't want to have something rigid that ends up, you know, driving up costs because of some fluctuation that's temporary, or, you know, the flip side of the equation, we don't want this to really have no impact because we didn't accurately project what costs would be, what new technologies would develop. So we want to make sure that we're building in features like the price floor and price ceiling that make sure we stay on track to reduce. We speed up if it turns out to be a lot cheaper than we're projecting right now, which always happens. But there are blips. There's a war in the Ukraine and prices spike. Like, we need to be able to manage in a smart way, but we have to make sure that those flexibility mechanisms don't undermine the ultimate goal. We're not planting trees in Indonesia instead of reducing pollution in poor communities. Nobody's proposing that, but it is important to look at the details of these kinds of flexibility mechanisms to make sure they're protective of both affordability and the environment and quality of life and equity benefits that we're trying to drive. So I'm going to stop there, and I hope we still have more time for Q&A. And I can see 14 more items have come in on the chat. So I'll take a look at those and pass it over to Eric.
Oh, Eric, you're muted.
Unmute. Okay. Sorry about that. Thanks, Dale, for those reactions. I totally agree that Cap and Invest is really just one of the many tools in the toolbox. But I think it, as you noted, and as Samir noted, it warrants some special attention given the moment that we're in. And so I won't go into a big song and dance about who REACT is. You feel free to Google us. We're an environmental justice organization based in Harlem in New York City. And we've been really I think, involved in this conversation for quite some time. Last year, we were part of an equity roundtable around Cap and Invest, setting some of the frame for how to center disadvantaged communities and other equity measures in the Cap and in the design of the pre-proposal that came out in December. Really quickly, I'll start by saying that there are some really exciting things about Cap and Invest. Dale noted, and I think Samir noted, that there are big opportunities with a program like Cap and Invest to aggregate some big resources, to drive some health benefits, and I think to make specific investments in so-called disadvantaged communities that we have been attracted to since the pre-proposal came out. And as climate justice increasingly impacts every one of our lives at every scale imaginable, we are super excited about being part of this conversation and others to help support making sure that the design of this program reflects both the priorities of so-called disadvantaged communities and environmental justice communities, but also can be seen as part of a broader imagination around how this transition to a clean energy economy actually benefits everyone. So with that said, I want to say that the slide that Samir showed around health benefits, like the 1,500 premature deaths that could be avoided through Cap and Invest, I think is really something that we should take note of, right? As communities who are disproportionately impacted by air pollution and particulate matter, especially here in New York City through our exposure and proximity to peaker plants, those kind of generating stations that are used to support the peak demand when all the air conditioners are running in the summer. Now it's been insanely hot for like a month straight. Release a lot of particulate matter because they're fossil fuel supplied. Retiring those peaker plants and helping to lower emissions and increase air quality is going to be something that we are really excited about seeing through the use of this program. I think I'm not sure Samir keyed in on this, but the pre-proposal analysis also sort of notes that there are up to 28,000 jobs that are going to be created through Cap and Invest in scenario A, and that's the scenario with the higher allowance price that we think is in our mind the floor of where Cap and Invest should be, not the highest imagined scenario. So I want to make sure that we're also really key in noting that there's 3 scenarios that were modeled, and they're all part of a proposal that is illustrative, not a concrete rule as of yet, which is why we need to get up to speed, get in the weeds, and get involved in the rulemaking process in order to get a program that works for all of us. While we're excited about both the health benefits and the investment possibilities here through Cap and Invest, we can talk all day about many of the upshots of Cap and Invest. There are some concerns. First, I want to take note of some comments in the chat that mentioned the price ceiling units. I think that is really concerning to us because we see it as essentially essentially the illusion of a cap, right? If the price ceiling is met in every model scenario, and then you essentially make unlimited amounts of price ceiling units available to obligated entities, there really isn't a cap in our minds. And so we find that incredibly kind of alarming and potentially dangerous, right? If we have these legally obligated goals that we need to hit, and essentially what you're creating is a pay to pollute system. I don't want that to escape our collective imaginations here. If we hold that in our minds, that price ceiling units will be made available in unlimited amounts to obligated entities once the price ceiling is met, that is highly problematic. Another concern that we have is around the sector-specific and facility-specific emissions. Now, there aren't any kind of sector-specific limits laid out in the pre-proposal outline. There are some calls for sector-specific limits in buildings, for example, as a way to help mitigate the continued investment in fossil fuel infrastructure. And more specifically, facility-specific limits on those peaker plants to help support managing and monitoring emissions from peaker plants in disadvantaged communities. New York City has almost a dozen of those, and they are really, really awful, and they are contributing, to people's upper respiratory illnesses and other outdoor air quality issues, like air quality issues. And so we are really concerned about making sure we address the retirement and replacement of peaker plants in the course of the use of the investments from this program. And so we think that that's another area of concern that's not specifically addressed in the context of the pre-proposal outline that we would love to see addressed in either the planning for the resources or just in other additional rulemaking. And quite frankly, maybe some additional modeling that has either been left on the cutting floor or needs to be done in order to make sure we address these issues. I know I'm running a little short on time here, but I wanted to just say, for the sake of our conversation here, that we think this administration moving forward could really stand to do three things, right? The top line takeaway for me is as we hear rumblings of a retreat on this program, or a slower phased-in rollout of this program, or delayed achievement of our Climate Act goals, we think of this as a way to really build a high-integrity program that has a cap aligned with the CLCPA's emissions targets that we view as a signature economic investment agenda for the state of New York. An anemic cap and invest program gives us anemic results. And the formula here is, if the formula here is to slow walk this program, you run the risk of being sort of caught in this trap between the people who villainize you for not going far enough and the people who villainize you for going too far, too fast. We don't need to be caught in a dangerous middle. We need to be bold, be big, and imagine with all of the tools that we have available to us. We want us to think. Secondly, we want the folks designing this program to think different, right? The current program outline may have some challenges, but that's what we're here to collectively solve for. Affordability is certainly a concern. For example, we think that reimagining the allocation of benefits to different populations, particularly for those who are the first and worst impacted, might be a way to think about allocating more direct benefits in a earlier way to support mitigating these conversations around who pays for the program and who gets impacted by the program. Again, simply reimagining the modeling around this program could be a way to address some of the concerns that we see cropping up in conversations around the program. Lastly, we think that we should always be keeping equity at the center. Again, aligning the cap with the CLCPA is critical, and making sure that we are mitigating regressive price impacts from the program on disadvantaged communities, low and moderate income households, and those households that are asset limited and income constrained but employed are also like hugely important, because those are the folks who I think Governor Hochul has mentioned in her notion of pausing congestion pricing in terms of like avoiding undue cost burdens and cost implications, and which we hear across an array of climate-related proposals. So with that, I'm going to go back to Betta here, and I'm just waiting for Samir to chime in.
Thank you so much. So yes, we are rapidly running out of time. We may be able to stay a few minutes over if people can, but I know we usually start to lose people at the top of the hour. I do want to give Anshul a chance now to walk us through the take action that we're encouraging everyone to do in order to really push for an ambitious and equitable program. So Anshul, do you want to go ahead and share your screen, and we can put a link in the chat to the take action?
Sure. So I don't need to share my screen, and I will be very quick since we are running out of time. As we heard from Samir, that in 2023, Governor Hochul proposed the New York Cap and Invest program as the sort of key regulatory mechanism for both the enforcement of the CLCPA emissions targets and for funding the CLCPA. So in some sense, we sort of the state put a lot of our eggs in one basket for ensuring CLCPA implementation. And now there are some indications from Governor Hochul that they seem to be sort of a backpedaling, which is not sort of surprising given what she did to congestion pricing. And we need to add some organizing muscle. And as Samir mentioned, we of course want everyone to submit comments. But in addition to that, NYCP has developed a tool that you can use to send a quick letter to the governor, NYSERDA, and DEC with a few simple asks, which include first and foremost, we actually need to roll out the program and not keep delaying it. We need to sort of have program design parameters that actually reduce the emissions meaningfully and keep us on track for meeting the targets of the CLCPA. We heard about some problems, some problematic elements in the pre-proposal about a very low price ceiling and an unlimited number of allowances available at those low price ceilings. So we need to push back against that. Couple of other asks in the letter are to keep the program fair and equitable for users of all energy sources, including electricity, which, as has been mentioned, is covered under RGGI, and to include program elements that reduce pollution in disadvantaged communities in proportion to the greenhouse gas reductions or even faster. So I will put a link in the chat, and we would encourage everyone to take like 30 seconds to send this letter out. And I would like to mention one quick thing which hasn't been mentioned to the best of my knowledge, is that programs like this are subject to periodic program reviews, like every couple of years, and these programs can be adjusted. Program parameters can be fixed. There would be opportunities for public input and stakeholder input at each of these program reviews. So we don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good here, and it's extremely important that Governor Hochul actually rolls out the program without further delay, so that we can get started, and there will be opportunities to improve and fine tune the program later. So with that, here is the link.
Thanks, Anshul. And Brian also shared it in the chat. So yes, please, everybody, send a message today. Let's make sure that the administration knows that there are a lot of people who care about this program and want to see it happen and want it to be ambitious and equitable. I also want to give a shout out to Kate Corton from EDF, who has been doing fantastic work to advance this program and recently submitted a letter on behalf of a number of organizations to that effect. So Kate, I'll give you a chance to just give a plug for the letter, because it sounds like you are continuing to take some organizational signatories, and there may be groups on here that would want to sign on.
Sure. Thanks, Betta. And hi, everyone. Again, Kate with the Environmental Defense Fund. Thanks for this awesome event. So we've been organizing with a number of partners to send a message, as Betta just described, to Governor Hochul and her team and others in New York State leadership that communicates the need for a cap and invest program to move forward and for it to be ambitious and equitable, as Anshul just said. So I will drop a link in the chat to a statement where you can see that. And if your organization is interested in signing on, you can just reach out to me. I'll drop my email as well. Thanks for the second here.
Thanks so much, Kate. And I hope that people take you up on that and sign on if you represent an organization, and if you're an individual, please sign our take action. Okay, so we technically only have 2 minutes, but I think a couple of our speakers at least can stay a little bit longer for questions. There are a lot of great questions in the chat. I think Dale, since you were first here in this lineup, are there any in particular that you would like to address?
I mean, I'll just touch on a couple of things. I mean, the whole price ceiling, yes, everything that Anshul said, but we can also be working on things that drive the price down, which is basically just reducing demand for fossil fuels. If you're reducing demand for fossil fuels, you're putting downward pressure on the allowance price, and you'll never hit the price ceiling. I mean, with RGGI, when they modeled, the RGGI caps, and then they added in, what if we did more on energy efficiency, the price went to zero. And, these are people who deal with like power plant air emissions. They're not necessarily familiar with, energy efficiency and what's happening on this kind of PSE side of the equation. That was 15 years ago. Now that's not the case anymore. So people are more aware, certainly in NYSERDA, but I just want to flag that there's lots of things in addition to the mechanism, the design of the mechanism, to make sure that nothing like that ever undermines the ultimate goals of the program. Also, similarly, on the whole replacing peakers, there's some cool, really innovative stuff. I know Massachusetts is tackling this directly, and we should go over there and find, not literally, but we should get some of the Massachusetts people to come talk to us about their strategy for dealing with peakers. They're more focused on some pieces of the puzzle. We're more focused on some other pieces of the puzzle, and we should learn that. And I just wanted to also note, there was a question about kind of the gas electric price differential. I think there is strong, very good awareness of that, and how do we make sure, and it is something that's a function of time. As people electrify, the cost of gas is going to go up, and so how do we protect people, especially people in affordable housing, and get them off gas before that price increase really starts to happen. But in the meantime, we do have to deal with, it's not everywhere. It is in New York more than in some other states, in the New York City area more than in some other areas of the state. We have a real price differential that we need to manage as we're transitioning to electrification. And this is just for electrification in buildings, gas versus electricity price.
Thanks, Dale, for offering that and touching on a lot of the questions and concerns in the chat in such an efficient way, given our time constraints. Eric, is there any particular question that you wanted to address, as we're now at 1:01? We knew there was going to be a lot to pack in here today.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I had to dial in, so I'm having a little trouble seeing the chat from my phone here. If there's something you think would be like really useful to lob at me, go for it. Better.
Well, I think we'll handle the question about the Tesla Powerwall batteries in another session.
Sam's taking care of it for us.
Thank you, Sam. And as we said, we will copy all of the questions and, to the best of our abilities and address them in a Google Doc and share that with the recording and Samir's slides that we'll talk about after.
I will jump in on this one question around the political risk of a high price ceiling. I think that's actually something that's worth talking about. And when you look at the modeled scenarios that are in the pre-proposal, pretty much across the board, as you increase the price ceiling, you drive more benefits to various households across the income bands that were modeled. And that's really important to note. I think the real question here isn't about whether or not we have a high price ceiling. It's about how you address the impact of price increases in a lead lag sort of way. So the real affordability concern, as I read it, is something's going to happen. It's going to drive up the price of gas, for example, and then someone's going to be mad at that. So how do you make sure that you soften the pinch or eliminate the pinch in a really direct and immediate way, so that there's not this, oh my gosh, you just made me pay more money to fill up my gas tank as part of this transition. This sucks. So what is again, I say this in my closing, how do we reimagine this benefit allocation in a more direct and more immediate way that's maybe outside of the scope of the way this proposal, which is illustrative, was set up? That's all I'm saying.
Anshul or Dale, any response to that?
Yeah, and that's huge. I mean, and we should have a whole conversation about communications and framing, because here's the price. This is the price of the allowances. Here's the gas price impact, 10 cents a gallon or whatever it is, the end of Western civilization as we know it, versus gas prices fluctuate by dollars, and we're just sitting here helpless. This is a whole policy about insulating everyone from the volatility of gas prices. Same with home heating costs. Then we will have homegrown electricity, and we will keep all of that money in a local economy instead of sending it's billions of dollars annually that we send out of state just to import fuel. So we are not generators of fuel in New York. So all of those dollars will stay in New York, and creating all the jobs. So, the story that is just allowances cost X, and now there's a gas price impact, versus how do we live our lives and what are the benefits that we're going to get? Samir went through the health benefits, the job benefits, but even if you're just talking about economics, pulling back with that larger story and helping our friends and neighbors understand that, and having that be part of our communication and how we're talking about it, because it's easy for everybody, including the state officials who are talking about it, to be kind of lost in the weeds, and then it just is interpreted in the worst possible way instead of the best possible way. And there really is a wonderful economic story to tell here, even if you didn't care about climate and didn't want to do anything about it.
Yeah, and I'll give some specific examples. The gas prices were over $4 a gallon as recently as last year. At the current gas prices, even at a very high price ceiling, it's unlikely that the gas prices will go above the psychological level of $4 a gallon. And so I don't think we need to worry about the price impact, especially when the commodity prices are low right now. And as the gas prices fluctuate, if the gas prices increase for any other reason, the opposition is still going to blame the climate action for any price increases. So we shouldn't be afraid of how the opposition is going to frame it. Rather than we should focus on our own framing and capturing the narrative. The opposition is going to frame it their way anyway, even if we don't implement the cap and invest. They're doing that with the heating prices. A New York Heat Act is actually an example of a policy that sort of Dale mentioned, that if we take actions like that, that will reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and help lower allowance prices and keep the cost of implementing the NICI program low. And our legislature and the governor, unfortunately, are also, while they make affordability an issue, are not taking these common sense measures like passing New York Heat, which actually help make the Nikki program more affordable while keeping
Yeah, no,
keeping it effective.
appreciate that, Anshul. I think we need a systems level view of this problem and not a sort of program by program sort of siloed view of how these things are going to impact consumers, households, ratepayers. And we're not getting that kind of reception from various levels of decision makers. And I think, again, reimagining how this stuff works together is really important. Dale did a great job of framing the economic kind of narrative. I've been a real champion of framing this as an economic development package and agenda. And I think it's one that lands more saliently if we think about this, avoided imports. We think about this systems level view, and we think about how we actually drive benefits earlier and more immediately to people who would be directly impacted by any of these tools as we transition. And that's how you meet the affordability goal and priority that's laid out in the Cap and Invest program.
Yes. So yes to all of this. And, want to just echo the importance of making sure that we are doing the critical public education about the benefits. And so I think as we move forward, we would love to, bring people back together, especially those of you who signed the message to Governor Hochul and the administration. So we know that you're committed to seeing this program happen and making it as ambitious and equitable as possible. Folks who represent organizations signing on to the letter that Kate shared, and really looking forward as soon as possible to grow a coalition of New Yorkers and organizations that care about this program, that want to see it happen, that want to see it be ambitious, and make sure the public understands the benefits so that they do get behind this and are excited about it. And so we will be following up with you, and hopefully we'll be able to share some great public education, materials and ways that we can educate our friends and neighbors and family members about how this transition is ultimately going to mean cleaner air and healthier communities and good jobs and more comfortable homes and a livable planet and all of the things that we all want. So thank you all so much for being here, for sharing your incredible knowledge and ideas and concerns and questions. And we will definitely be in touch very soon and circulate the take action in case anybody missed it or wants to share it with friends. Please do. And again, the recording and the slides and the Q&A. So even if we didn't get to your question or your comment, we will in the follow-up. So again, thanks so much to our speakers and to everybody for being here. I really think that we're going to do this, and 2025 is going to be the year where we take things to the next level in the climate movement, and on many fronts to create a better society and better world. So thanks so much, everybody. Appreciate you.